Our next guest is no stranger to Arctic security policy. Rob Huebert is a professor in the Department of Political Science at the University of Calgary. He's also the interim director for the Center for Military Security and Strategic Studies, and he joins us now. You're perfect for this question, Rob. Doubling the size of the Ranger Force, acquiring 2 more icebreakers, and building Canada's first military base in Iqaluit. What do you make of this plan?
Well, if it's followed through, it will meet many of our most important security needs in the Arctic. It's going to provide us with a means of being able to actually start being able to provide a counter for the increasing threat that we see from the Russians. And at the same time, it will also be able to be brought forward to show the Americans that we are not leaving the North undefended, and that in fact that we are carrying our weight when it comes to security issues. All of this, of course, being if it goes ahead.
Talk about some of the threats we are seeing from Russia and also China.
Well, the major threat from the Russians really start developing way back in the 2002, 2003s. To many people, the Russians never really stopped being a great power in the Arctic. They were exhausted, but they've never moved away from their nuclear deterrent forces. They've never really moved away from the naval bases that they've had all along their northern sea route. The threat that the Russians now face, of course, is that they've become an expansionary and aggressor state. We see this in Georgia, we see this in Ukraine. Their major force of their nuclear capabilities are in the Arctic, and that's why Arctic security for Canada becomes so important.
How much would a strategy like that cost?
But this is the problem, because we haven't really done anything in the Arctic of any similar magnitude. We're not going to know what the costs are. We have a listing post up in Alert. We have 4 forward operating locations for our aircraft to operate, and we have a headquarters in Yellowknife. But we really don't have any criteria by which we can turn around and say, okay, we've got experience, we know what this is going to be. We know that when the port of Iqaluit was in fact expanded to a limited degree, that ended up being quite expensive, and so I've got no illusions that this indeed is going to be equally expensive. The building of the icebreakers, of course, if we build it in Canada, or if we build it in conjunction with the agreement we have with the Finns and with the Americans, it will also probably be in the $750 million range to possibly $1 billion each. And the Rangers, of course, the expansion will not be nearly so much, but it will be a cost in terms of whether or not we can find enough individuals that will join that expansion.
You mentioned Iqaluit and the challenges of building there. Nunavut's premier has called for consultation through this process. What should that look like with folks in the region?
Well, one of the big issues, of course, coming forward is how can you engage upon such a large-scale development and ensure that wherever possible you can engage the local communities to ensure that they can benefit as much as possible. For example, one of the things that's going to have to be changed is you're going to have to vastly improve the communication capabilities of that region, including that of the internet and so forth. And so that's going to be something I think that the community can share in. The other aspect, and this is something that hasn't been picked up as much, is of course that Poilievre has also said that the existing Liberal policy of the expansion of the modernization of Nunavut will also continue. I mean, this is a rarity of a bipartisan continuance, but nevertheless, it means that Iqaluit then becomes a starting off point for some of the radar sites that they will be placing in the high Arctic. And so that becomes a possibility in terms of sharing, in terms of infrastructure support.
Before we let you go, what role do you think Trump is playing in all of this, with this focus now on the Arctic? Because he's talking about it. Is that one of the silver linings here from all that's happening with us in the U.S. right now, some focus on the Arctic?
Well, I think it's a silver lining in general that, in fact, we finally have taken our security serious. I mean, we've always had this mythology that the Americans will always be there and always be protecting us, and that ultimately we don't really have to do anything in the Arctic or in any other issue when it comes to security. I mean, once again, I think Trump and his policies are going to be very dangerous for Canada, but at the very least, they at least provide us with an ability to try to finally focus our mind on these issues.
That was Rob Huebert, professor in the Department of Political Science at the University of Calgary.